What's up, guys? So it's been a long time since I did a video game talks, or as I used to call it, video games and society video, and I'm actually adding your guys' thoughts in this video, more towards the end. So right now I'm going to talk about my notes, and then I'm going to add your guys' thoughts on the topic. The topic is, what are some things that could hinder the success or the quality of a video game? Now, of course, there isn't a set list where it's like you look it up in a book and it says exactly right there. This is open to a lot of interpretation, but these are the things that I think hinder a lot of video games nowadays, at least with what I've seen in multiple occasions. First of all, I'm going to talk about casual gaming. It's really hard to put a definition on anything having to do with gamers, because it's like, well, are you a hardcore gamer? Are you just a gamer? Are you a casual gamer? You know, you kind of want to always, at least I do, I kind of always want to say, you know, we're all gamers, we all play games. But there is a difference. There is a big difference. And the difference is actually what really separates video games. And also, that same difference is what developers should always have in mind. So when it comes to casual gaming, these types of games are more geared to somebody that doesn't really feel comfortable with a controller. So for example, iOS, Fruit Ninja, or Angry Birds. Those are more casual games because anybody could just pick it up and play it. You wouldn't have to learn the controls, like what does X do, or like where XBA and all that is. You just pick it up, swipe at the screen, or press, or just pull back and then press this. It's simple. It's casual. The Wii is another example. The Wii still has somewhat of a controller integrated in it, but it has a lot to do with motion, and it's easier for people that aren't gamers to just pick it up and go for it. You know, you could do yoga on there. You don't really have to memorize a controller, because a lot of people that aren't gamers, that don't really play games, find that difficult to learn, the controller. You take these types of gamers, casual gamers, put them to play, let's say, some shooter, like a first-person shooter, Call of Duty, whatever you want. They're going to be completely lost. They're going to keep dying, because they're not used to the controllers, and because of the camera. Being able to control the camera and your character's movements on each finger, the camera on this finger and your character's movements on this. For somebody that is not used to controllers, it's not only confusing, but it's almost mentally difficult to have to react that way. It's almost like trying to learn how to play a piano. You know, you learn the right hand, and then the left hand, you're just like, man, this is weird because I have to be doing something else with the left hand. That's what I've noticed with people that don't really know how to play games. It really disorients them. They're just like, oh my god, I don't know how to do this. They'll like bump into walls, or the camera will be moving all over the place, and they'll find it hard to move, which is completely understandable. I'm not bashing that at all, but I'm explaining the differences. Now you get a hardcore gamer. Hardcore gamers, I think, are gamers that are they have a variety in what they could play. Like, they could play shooters, they could play RPG games, because they're all very different. Give them a complex game and they'll play it. Give them a casual game and they could play it. And then, of course, there are specific types of gamers, like gamers that only play first-person shooters, or gamers that only play RPGs, or gamers that only play strategy games. All these games are completely different. So casual gaming should be treated as almost a separate genre. What I've seen a lot of lately in different, and I'm not saying all video game developers do this, or all publishers do this, or all consoles are aiming for this, but the trend that I'm starting to notice is a lot of video game developers or publishers are starting to want to implement casual gaming into games that were never about casual gaming. Games that really have nothing to do with the casual gamer. Somebody that plays Angry Birds on their phone, are they really going to go on the console, on the Xbox 360, on the PS3? Are they going to get a next-gen system just to play The Witcher 3, or to play some big game, Titanfall? They're not going to do that, because they don't they're like, why would I want to play that? No, I only play Angry Birds because, it kills time when I'm at the waiting room or something. So I've seen a lot of developers trying to appeal to casual gamers in video games that have nothing to do with a casual gamer. So focusing too much on this wider audience, on grouping all these types of gamers into one category, making one game for all these different types of gamers, that game is going to be kind of like, who is going to play it? You know what I mean? Like, especially if it's a mix. A casual gamer isn't going to play those games. A hardcore gamer that knows how to play casual games and knows how to play all these crazy other games, yeah, they'll play it because they know how to. This whole motion sensor, no need for the controller, voice recognition is, I think, pushing the development of games back. Because if they didn't have to focus on that new technology, implementing it in games as like a necessity, or like, oh, we need to appeal to those casual gamers, or we need to appeal to those people that don't know how to use a controller. Trust me, those casual gamers, they probably don't even want to play that type of game. They want to play something on their phone because it's handheld, it's right there, it's quick, boom. They're not going to go on a console, sit in their room and play it. Don't focus on the wider audience because you are mixing different types of gamers that sometimes just don't go together. Now, for example, voice recognition, motion sensor. I'm not saying that games should not have that implemented in them. What I'm saying is that they should always be optional. I have this fear that gaming seems to be pushing technology towards a touchpad, motion sensor, voice command type of era. And I don't think that will appeal to many gamers. It might appeal to some, but it's not going to appeal to a lot of gamers. I mean, the controller has been around since about 1970s. And it's still around. It's changed so much, but the controller still dominates the console gaming. So trying to move away from that, or trying to implement, like let's say the Xbox One, it has the Kinect implemented in it, meaning that they're going to make games with motion sensor commands or with voice commands, whether you like it or not, because the Kinect is there. There's no more, oh, well, I don't own a Kinect. So, okay, the developers, they could just put it in there and make you use it because it's in there already. There's no more, I don't have a Kinect. No, it's there. So use it. The gaming industry has taken a huge change from before. And I think a lot of people don't know that, or they don't accept that. Gamers, I think, know that. But the rest of the people that don't play games, they're still under the impression that gaming is for kids and that video games are for kids. Because every time you tell somebody, oh, I'm going to go play my video game or something like that, they're like, pfft. It's like they think that it's for kids. And it's like, dude, this game is not for kids. The industry has evolved completely. Your target audience, I think the majority of gamers nowadays are much older than they were back then. Back then, you had kids and teens who were the majority of gamers. And now, I think with the rise of technology and the way that video games have matured so much, and they've implemented these cinematic experiences, they started to appeal to older audiences. I mean, you have your gamers that have been playing games since they were kids, like me. I've been playing games since I was a little kid. I remember playing the Atari. I grew up with Nintendo. You have those gamers that are in their 30s now, who used to play those old games, but now they're like, whoa, look at video games now. There's so much opportunity now. You could experience a video game almost like a movie, and even more, because there's interaction, there's choice. You move that story along. So nowadays, the majority of gamers are more in their 20s, like their mid to late 20s, and even their 30s and beyond. The teenagers, of course, there are teen gamers, there are kid gamers still, but I think that developers are the ones that really have noticed this evolution in the industry, in the gaming industry, which is why there has been a rise in more mature gaming and more cinematics added, more complexity, because they know that the gamer nowadays is older, and they could appreciate that. They could understand that. That leads me to my next point: scapegoating. These people that don't know this, that don't really pay attention to the gaming industry, usually use video games as scapegoats. They blame video games for the negative aspects of the whole world. It's like, oh yeah, video games are to blame. Somebody goes out in a shootout, oh, it's because they played freaking Grand Theft Auto or something. And it's on the news all the time. It's like, people are playing too many video games. It's making them lazy, fat, and this and that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This directly affects the development completely, 100%, because the publishers are going to say, you know what, you can't put that because we're going to be on tonight's news if you put that. So they limit. There are these limitations on many games nowadays. There are developers that I respect greatly that really, they're like, you know what? No. We want to make this game. We want to tell this story. This is our target audience. This game is for them. There aren't many developers like that because they're under big publishers like EA, Ubisoft. That kind of negativity could take them down, especially if they're on the news. There is a lot of negativity in the world, and there's no way that you could pinpoint it on video games. There's just no way. There are too many factors in today's world that could be more of an influence than video games. What about television? What about movies? What about the internet? Kids have more access to the internet than they do to video games. And they could find worse things on the internet than they ever will on a video game. Now, I'm not saying that this applies to every situation. Video games have no fault in nothing. Of course, I'm not saying that. I do know that there are some people that want to do what they do in video games in real life. But it's just wrong to always pinpoint it on video games and to give them such a bad reputation. Video games have a bad reputation with a lot of parents nowadays. They hear anything about video games and you automatically see them just like, it's almost like you're talking about the devil or something. But because of this, video game development is hindered, it's limited, because a lot of big publishers just don't want to take the risk. And instead of getting a mature, complex game for an adult, you get a very limited version of it. And like I was saying, the age group is different for gamers now, or at least the majority of gamers, the gamers that want those mature, complex games. For example, The Witcher. That game is complex. It's mature. A little kid would not play The Witcher. They wouldn't play it. Of course they wouldn't. They shouldn't. But for an adult, those types of games are like, this is perfect. Because we're on a more mature level. But when you get mainstream series or mainstream video games that we also like, by we I mean like us mature adults, we also like those, but you see these limitations placed on the video game because kids are playing the game that they shouldn't be. Why don't they look at the ratings? The rating of the game tells you that kid should not be playing it. Why even limit it as if that kid was going to be playing it? It's like publishers, they think, you know what, that kid's going to eventually play it. No, if that kid eventually plays it, that's their fault. That's their parents' fault. It's not our fault. So since I'm talking about publishers, I'm going to go into publishers. There are some publishers that rush their developers for a release date. This is one of the saddest things to me, because especially when the developer is extremely talented in making games, and you see it's just obvious that the publisher is rushing them, and the game, what kind of game do you think you're going to get? You're going to get a rushed game, and it's absolutely evident to the gamer. It's obvious that that game was rushed. You get glitches. You get plot holes. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say DLC as well, because it's kind of like whatever we don't finish fitting in there, make it as DLC. You get more DLC, which I'm kind of like, I'm like, whatever. I already accepted that. I know that's part of gaming nowadays. But yeah, you get more DLC. And a lot of people hate that. A lot of people hate that nowadays, because they don't want to spend the money. They're like, why do I have to spend more money when that should have been in the game? A lot of people just get pissed off about that. That's obviously going to affect the success of that video game. I didn't want to mention names, but one example of this is Capcom. Capcom will release, and I'm not kidding you, for Dragon's Dogma, they released a DLC every day. That was overboard. That's just pushing it. So this directly taps into another thing that will hinder the success of a video game, is piss off your customers. Piss them off, and people are going to stop buying your product. Obviously. I've seen this so much. I've seen so much of this in the comments. People saying, I'm never going to buy another game of this developer ever again. And I'm like, it all has to do with a record. The record that that developer or that publisher has. Because after a certain point, when you see that everything they put out is rushed, it's glitchy, it's this and that, gamers are going to say, you know what? I'm done. So publishers getting on developers' backs is a huge problem nowadays. This directly ties to the series syndrome. The series syndrome is, let's say, something like Call of Duty. Where Call of Duty, you get, I don't even know how many Call of Duties there are anymore. There's one like, every year, I think? If you're lucky. Sometimes it's like, 7 months, 8 months difference? Now, for these types of games, I guess it works. I've never really played these games, so I'm not going to say too much on them. But what I do know is that they have shorter campaigns. They're short. They're not that long. They survive from their multiplayer, usually. I see why they bust these out like rabbits in mating season. But when other types of games try to imitate this, you could see it suffer. Especially with games that are highly focused on the story. I'd say the first game was very story-oriented. It wasn't that short. It was a little bit longer. And it's like, oh, that was so good. And then the developers start getting greedy, which is my next point. They start getting greedy. They're like, you know what? Let's put another one out. People love the first one. They're going to buy the second one. Faux show. Let's bring it out next year. They try to make it as story-oriented again, but it's going to suffer because you need way more time than that. If you're going to have a small campaign, let's say 7-10 hours. Gears of War 1 is super short. Gears of War 1 was 7 hours? 6 hours? So you could bust that out. But another game that's 15 hours long, you try to bust one out every year, and that game's going to suffer. I will tell you that right now. That game is going to be full of glitches. That hinders the quality of a game so much. People do not want to play games with glitches. Anybody will tell you that. If you ask somebody, you want to play this game? It's full of glitches. Or this game. Same game, but this one doesn't have glitches. Nobody's going to choose the one with glitches. And that's one thing that developers don't want. They can't have that type of negativity in their fan base. So that will hinder the quality and the success of the game for sure. So development time is huge for the success and quality of a game. That's obvious. Development time, dedication, organized teams. You should always have separate teams working on separate franchises. You need to have one team focused on one project. The game that you put out is going to directly tell you the team that was working on it. Another thing about series. I was listening to Mike Laidlaw from the Dragon Age team. This applies to any series that has a lot of lore. The Elder Scrolls, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Halo. Especially made up worlds where you freaking have to put history. You have to make up the history. You have to make up the language. You have to make up the races. You make up all that stuff. If you're going to commit to creating a world, to creating a series, you have to commit to making that lore fit. That's another thing that could hinder the quality of a game, the quality of a series, because a lot of times I've seen this so many times, that fans know more about the lore of a series than the actual developers. Especially when you add comics, books, it starts to become a monster. And if you don't have a way to control that, if you don't have a way to keep all that organized, all that lore organized, those fans, I will guarantee it, will pick it apart. And if there's any plot hole or anything that they see just doesn't fit, where they're like, this doesn't fit with so-and-so. And the developer, let's say the developer already said it's all canon. If you already say that it's all canon, you better be sure that everything that you put out is following the lore, because people will pick that up. So Mike Laidlaw was saying that since the Dragon Age world is so big and it's only growing bigger and bigger, and they're adding books and comics and all this stuff, and all this stuff is canon. They have said that. All of it is part of the lore. They're expanding on the lore. They actually hired a criminal chronologist, but it has to do with chronologizing crime and making it all organized so you could see the exact order of events and all that stuff. They actually hired someone that does that to keep the Dragon Age lore organized, because it's so much and they want to get it all right. That's awesome. That's dedication. That every developer that is going to start a series in that type of realm where you're like, let's create a world, please just do it some justice, because a lot of times those fans are going to know more than you are. Which is fine, but if you're gonna keep making games, there's gonna be like freaking plot holes. I've seen a lot of fans really get pissed off, so that could hinder the success of that game. If fans are starting to notice that developers just don't put that dedication into their games. And then comes the obvious ones, money and technology. Back then, you didn't really need great technology in order to make a good game. But nowadays, with the way that video games have evolved, like I was saying, that a lot of gamers now expect good graphics. They expect this amazing gameplay, like evolved gameplay, where it's like, let me do this. Like, why the hell can't I do this? You know, that kind of thing. Where especially when they know that the technology allows for it. We're like, why didn't they just put this? They could do it. You hear that all the time. You hear that with gamers playing games. Like, why didn't they let me do this? They could do it. They let me do this, so how come they didn't let me do that? So gamers nowadays are kind of, I guess, spoiled, because the way that gaming has been evolving, it's almost like gamers expect this kind of stuff. to be in new games as games come and are being released. This doesn't really apply for PC games. PC games, you will see old school type of graphics, and it's appealing to a lot of gamers because it's like, ooh, you don't see this anymore. Like Minecraft. Sure, you could play Minecraft on the Xbox now, but it started on the PC. Cube World, all those games that are just like these little like, I don't know. It's just like a different realm. PC gaming is almost like its own entity. It's kind of weird. Like I was talking to my brother the other day. I was like, gaming is so split up. Nowadays, back then it was just like one big thing, gaming and gamers. But now it's like there's categories. They're PC gaming because it's its own realm. And then you've got console games. And then you've got Nintendo off on the side. It's like, and then there's Nintendo. And they all should be treated as different because they are very different. So we're in a very interesting time for gaming right now. But this whole graphics thing, with like say console games, it's kind of rare to see new games have those types of graphics. Those like 16-bit, 8-bit. I mean, unless you're talking about the Nintendo. Nintendo, it's like, oh yeah, of course, it's a Nintendo. But if you're talking about freaking Xbox 360, if you're talking about PS3, and let's not even talk about the next gen. If we're talking about those games, you rarely see a game that doesn't have good to pretty good graphics. Xbox Live, yeah, I could see it for an Xbox Live, but not for a full console game. If you try to do that for a full console game, and you even try to market it at $60, good luck. So content and price is a huge thing that developers should always keep in mind. Content and price. Is the content worth the price? Because gamers always have that in mind. Reviewers will almost always mention that. Is it worth the price? Is the content worth the price? And then of course there's marketing. Marketing is a huge thing when it comes to the success of something. I'm not saying video games. I'm going to say something this time because there is an example. Take the Xbox One. The Xbox One suffered so much negativity, and a lot of it had to do with the way that it was marketed. I will explain in more detail in a different video when it comes to the Xbox One and all that. But just the marketing, the way that things are marketed, if you lie when you're marketing your product, the whole false advertisement, you false advertise on those trailers, on anything like that, and then you put out a game that has nothing to do with what you showed. That should never be done because you are taking advantage of your consumers, and they know like that. As soon as they play that game, they're gonna be like, this is not what I saw. And not advertising well enough. If you don't advertise that game well enough, if you don't market it well enough, people are not gonna know about it. They're just gonna be, best example, Enslaved. I don't think this game had enough marketing, had enough hype, because it didn't do very well. In sales, it didn't do very well. And this game is amazing. This game is so good. This is on my list of favorite games. And it didn't sell well. Now, I didn't play this game on release, which doesn't surprise me because I didn't even know what the hell it was. I played it way later. But I'm glad I did. And it's sad that on release, it didn't do as well as it should have. And I think it all comes down to the marketing. If you don't make your product known, if you don't make it exciting, but without lying, if your content is good, it's not going to be hard to market it. For this next one, I'm really happy that this person responded. And the reason why is because this person is actually a developer.